Ladies and gentlemen, Phil Jupitus. Thank you very much. Now, let me look at... Right, there's a tiny person there. Hello. What's your name? Reed. Cool. How old are you, Reed?
9.
Yeah, we're going to be fast-tracking your language tonight, son. You grew up in a pub? Dear boy, you probably know more words than me. So, hi, Reed's over here, he's 9, and his book comes out in 20 years. It's called How I Killed a Fat Man.
When Buzzcocks captain Phil Jupitus appeared in Winchester this week, he spoke exclusively to WINOL. In this brutally honest interview, he reveals the truth behind his departure from BBC Six Music.
Thank you, my friend. Very, very good of you.
Because when you take a gig on, and then you kind of, when you get to like 4 years through it, you think, this ain't quite right, and you can't figure out what's not right about it. I mean, it's very well paid, I love doing it, but I stopped doing it because, you know, ultimately it was just not a good fit for me.
Okay, well, I mean, yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, you said, in the book it was BBC Six Music.
Yeah.
It was, you had a big sort of fallout. It was a spectacular bust-up, I read.
Yeah.
But you did mention that if that had not happened, you'd maybe still be working there now. Do you wish that?
That was one incident that happened after I'd left them. They used to have me back to sit in for people, but then I did a show on air and I spoke out of turn on air, which is always the worst thing to do when you're DJs. Is the although sometimes it can be the best thing that you do, is actually to kind of speak quite plainly and speak the truth. But there was a lot of fuss about people altering the results of competitions and pretending people had phoned in. Well, any radio show that's pre-recorded is pretending, is lying from the get-go. And on Christmas Day, all of the radio shows you listen to, or 99% are pre-recorded, because no one goes to work on Christmas Day. So there's just one dude in the studio playing stuff out. And so, of course, they act like they're live, and that in and of itself is a conceit, is a deceit. And so when people, the right-wing media were getting very uppity about the BBC or rigging competitions, well, you just want the show to sound vibey and like people are calling in. They weren't corruptly giving away prizes to other people. They were just saying someone had won it when they hadn't, just to try and make the show feel live. And it was one of the most ludicrous overreactions to just common sense that I'd ever heard. And there was a very interesting thing, the show where I had the fallout was supposed to be the greatest collaboration records of all time. And it was a vote done with the Six Music listeners. And so it's, that was the title of it. And the record that won was an album track by Sinead O'Connor with a New Zealand pipe band, the title of which I can't remember. That was the #1 collaboration record of all time, because the Sinead O'Connor website had said, oh, there's this thing going on, let's get this record to #1, we can do it. There's 500 of us online now, let's rig this competition. And they blew the results out of the water, because the BBC, because of all this sensationalism about tinkering with competitions, they'd left the results alone. And so I started shouting my mouth off on air about the Sinead O'Connor fan club, basically. But you know what? When you're making radio, you've got to show common sense, and that means exercising editorial control. And sometimes that does involve what at worst I would call white lies. You're just making something a piece of entertainment. It's not the news; it's an entertainment show, and so things will happen.
No, that was great, wasn't it, actually? Because again, Joe was showing real enterprise and going out there and getting that, and that was the best thing of all, really. The well-known guy comes to town, and it's important you're there with a camera. And what was amazing, he was really opening up, wasn't he? He was really opening up and talking about his life on the radio and things he didn't agree with, things he did agree with, in a kind of very interesting way. So excellent stuff. You can't go wrong if you get these well-known people. Every time they come to town, you get them on air like that. You're going to get viewers, which is what we're here for.
Yeah, it is indeed. Now, Richard Cheetham, a lecturer here at the university, set himself a challenge of taking part in a brutal race across the Atacama Desert. Andrew Giddings has this inspirational interview.
That was agony. Yeah, it was agony. You feel like you're being suffocated. The heat was extraordinary. It was relentless. was a bit like somebody having a blowtorch on you. This is a situation where if I don't prepare myself, I could die.
This is the Atacama Desert, one of the most hostile environments on Earth. And this is Richard Cheetham, who risked his life to run across its scorched surface.
An email came through in the morning of that fateful day, and it said, do you want to run across the driest desert on Earth, which is 155 miles. So I said, seems like a good idea, and so we did it, and the rest is part of my history.
Richard trained hard for 6 months, but it was not until he stood on the start line that he began to really understand what lay ahead of him.
What's it like with all those other people knowing, well, thinking maybe that you know what you're about to do?
There is doubt. You look at people who are physically in better shape than you, younger than you, they look like proper marathon runners, and then the reality checks, this is it.
The Atacama Desert sits over 3,000 metres above sea level. Once the race was underway, the thin air and searing heat inevitably began to take their toll.
It was a bit like somebody having a torch, you know, like a blowtorch on you, but the heat was extraordinary. It was relentless.
I don't think many people ever really experience that level of fatigue. So how would you describe that?
You change your focus. For me, being an expectant father, you know, that was a real big time for me.
Was it that when things became very emotional, was it thinking about that did it for you?
Yeah, definitely, because you know, I wanted them to be proud of me, and I spent 6 days thinking of a boy's name and ended up having a daughter.
While thoughts of his unborn child drove Richard on, he had to watch other runners falling apart.
You mentioned the word break a few times. When a runner breaks, what is that?
It's quite sad, really. Quite sad to see people sat down who can't carry on, people who've run out of water, people at checkpoints who are lying on their back on a drip. On the longest day, a guy stopping because he was peeing blood, and he knew then that was it, his race was over. And it works two ways. To see somebody break is obviously sad, and you do what you can, but also when you see someone break, you think, that's not going to be me.
Was there a section that you remember was just physically a terrible thing to have to do?
Yeah, the longest day was the hardest day, because both my feet were badly blistered. Your feet are sore, and you know, and they were sort of bleeding and raw. That you can't put anything over the open wound. You can't put a second skin. I knew the first hour of that morning was going to be tough, because I'd feel every single impact onto that ball of my foot.
What does it feel like?
Okay, I'll tell you this. If you imagine you cut a hole in your hand and you pour vinegar on it and you just hold it there, and then you put your hand on the floor for all that time and just bash it constantly like that, and then have sand in it, and then have it on the other foot as well, and then all the other psychological things that go on.
At this point, Richard still had 85 miles to go. The course ran through a punishing salt basin.
It's pools of water with ridges of salt. We had to find a path. My foot went in there after being dressed by the doctor the night before, and it went into the salt water within an hour of the longest march.
What did that feel like?
That was agony. Yeah, it was agony.
Tell me about the finish line, the end of the race.
It's never ending. It's never ending. But when it did come, we crossed the line. I didn't cry. I didn't get emotional, and I had a can of Coke. Remember that? And it was absolutely amazing. And we hugged each other. We went to presentation in the evening, and my feet were by that time suddenly ballooned up, and so the celebrations were muted by the fact that I couldn't get to the bar, and I spent a lot of time sitting down. But
what does it feel like having done something like that? Emotionally, what's the moment like for you in your head as you cross the line?
It was difficult to describe. There's so many people I wanted to thank. That was the first thing I wanted to do, was to thank people. Yeah, I just wanted to really thank people who'd helped me, yeah. Wanted them all to be there. Wanted them all to be there. That's it. Sorry.
No.
About that.
Okay. Who did you want at the finish line?
I've been to it. I watched Ironman New Zealand once when I lived out there, and I spent like 6 hours at the finish line just watching people come in, and I watched a guy come in and both of his children, he picked them up and they crossed the finish line with him, and you know, I wanted that. I did want that, yeah. There's one thing I haven't mentioned actually. It was the best shower I ever had. The night we got across the finish line was the best shower, and that's when you suddenly look down and you know, you lost every ounce of fat on your body, and you know, you're tired, but yeah, there is that physical feeling of just, I don't know, if you can do anything. Nothing in life of any worth is easy. I've always said that. Even if it's difficult and challenging, you'll look back and think, that was a tough day, a tough moment, but it's worthwhile, you know? And if it was easy, that desert would have been full of people running, but it wasn't. And find the thing you want to do that is your personal challenge, whatever it is, and you'll have moments when you want to stop, but you'll have a moment when something happens and you carry on. And that's defining in you as a person and defining your life.
Heavy clouds roll past your window. Time is standing still.
Andrew joins us now. Wow, Andy. What on earth made him want to do such thing?
Well, a couple of years ago, he had an attempt at climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. And a very short distance from the top, he came down with altitude sickness and had to stop. And it was always a very sore thing for him. And he told me that one day one of his friends made a comment that Cheryl Cole and Chris Moyles managed it, and that was kind of the last straw. So he decided to take something on even bigger, and that's what it was. But I think also he's just at a time in his life where he really wants to see what he's made of.
It looked like it was quite an experience making that film for you, Andy.
Definitely, both in terms technically, with the multi-cameras in the interview, doing a one-to-one interview, but even more than that, just having the conversation with him was very interesting and very inspirational. And he's an absolutely brilliant guy, and far more humble than you'd ever expect from somebody that's done anything like that. But I hope that a lot of the kind of feelings and inspiration that I took from actually carrying out the interview came across in the film for anybody that watches it.
Oh, Ian, would you ever consider doing anything like this?
Well, funnily enough, I have run the odd marathon, but I mean, I certainly wouldn't be thinking of going across the Atacama Desert, I have to say. And I doubt if Andrew would either, after seeing that guy's feet.
So how
or
was that
anybody would,
marathon
actually.
for you then?
Sorry?
How was that marathon for you?
Ah, it was fine, but that's another very long, sad story. Let's not go into that here now. But except that my feet, fortunately, never looked like his feet did, and I think that's probably the image that most of us will remember from that piece. But I was going to say, I mean, congratulations, Andrew. I thought that was a excellent piece, wasn't it? Because what stood out for me was the video edit, really, that you managed on that. And you used imagination, particularly at the beginning, and you created an atmosphere at the beginning which kind of drew me in, and I wanted to keep watching it, and there was a kind of use of music and sound and those stunning still pictures. So it was the creation of the atmosphere, which is really important in making short video pieces. It just draws people in. And you really achieved that by just using, imagination and flair and that kind of thing. Excellent. So, so well done. And again, he opened up to you, didn't it? It turned into a confessional, didn't it? Really.
It did a little bit. I can't, some of the things that he spoke about can't be the easiest kind of thing to speak of anyway. Let alone when you're kind of face to face in a studio with 3 cameras on you. And I don't think he's ever done anything like that, not a studio interview. But absolutely remarkable guy. And what I appreciate the words that you said about what I made from it. I couldn't have done it if he wasn't so generous with his time and so great in the interview. So huge thanks to Richard as well.